Welcome back to the Star Spangled Beauty Ladder Quilt Quilt Along. We are on the week of June 2nd. Today we'll be making the ribbons block, piece filler blocks 1 and 2. I've got everything prepped. Let's get started on the ribbons block. You want to refer to your instructions on page 37 for the ribbons block for the cut length of all your ribbon. I already trimmed my ribbon ahead of time. There were a few things I noticed. These were already cut, and it does say in the instructions that these should be 11 inches long. Mine are all a little bit shy of 11 inches, and a couple of them have the little cut mark right there. I'm going to leave that on until the block is done, and then I can even them up and trim them off. For all the other ribbons and the lace that I had to cut, I cut them the day before, and then I used some spray check on the ends, and I let them dry overnight. It talks about the fusible backing here and ironing the fusible backing to the wrong side of the background fabric. I did that. This is the background fabric, and I accidentally did it on the back of this fabric. Even though I did that by accident, I probably would have done it on purpose. We're going to be cutting these into fabric strips, and they're going to be mixed in with the ribbon as part of the ribbon block. The fusible will help keep it from fraying, so I'm not worried about having the fusible on the back of that. The first step of this block is to trim this up. Grab your fabric strip fabric. We need to mark the center. I'm going to fold it in half, press it, and then make a center mark with my water-soluble marker. Quick mark. We want to measure 1.5 inches on either side of that mark and make another mark. I'm going to mark that, and we're going to measure 1.5 this way and mark that. Here's my center mark, 1.5 inches this way and 1.5 inches this way. It says to clip these 1/2 inch in, and then it tells you to rip the fabric. Honestly, I never would have done that. I would have cut the fabric even if I didn't have the fusible on the back. What you're going to end up with is two 1.5 by 12 inch strips. You could have just taken a ruler and measured 1.5 by 12 and cut 2 strips. That works too. There's your 2 strips. You can use a little water and get rid of the mark, but it looks like these are going to fold over like this in the end, or this will get caught up in the seam allowance. It won't really matter. Load your light mesh cutaway. My machine wanted the big hoop. This is a 9.5 by 14 inch hoop. Remember to hand tighten and screwdriver tighten. I am doing the block by block quilting, so we need to find the KDQ 407 Stars 8x10 design. I'm on a Baby Lock Meridian, and I have all my files on USB. Find my USB, Star Spangled Beauty, KDQ 407, and then the 8x10, which I know is down near the bottom. There we go. Once I have my design pulled up, I hit the set button, and then the embroidery button. This block uses the color Pearl for your thread. Have your batting and your background fabric ready. We've done this before. I'm going to put this to music. We'll get it quilted and then go on to the next step. I added tape to this. This was a really tight squeeze. In fact, I'm right on the line here at the bottom. I've got a little extra over at the top. I don't think it's going to be a problem. It looks like we're going to trim this before we add our ribbon. I'm going to pull the tape off and then do the background quilting. We have our quilting done. Now we're on the sewing the block section. It says if needed, trim the background fabric to 8.5 by 10.5. I went ahead and got my 8.5 by 10.5 orange pop ruler. We'll trim up the block. Get all your ribbons handy. We're going to go ahead and lay these out. I need to do this facing me. This is the top. So that'll be your top, the short side, but I'm standing over here. It tells you to place the fabric strips, ribbons, and lace as desired, extending the top edge of the strips, ribbons, and lace 1/8 inch above the top edge of the background fabric and to tape into place. I'm going to follow the picture. I'm going to lay it out just like in the picture, but I know me, and I know if I lay all of that out and then I try to put tape on the top, everything's going to move. What I'm going to do is grab a piece of the paper tape a little bit longer than my block and put it behind the block, sticky side up. So as I'm laying down my lace, I can push it on the tape and it won't move. I'm going to lay it like this. This is sticky side up. And it says to lay your ribbons 1/8 inch above the top edge. I'm going to go ahead and mark 1/8 of an inch, and then that'll help me line up my ribbons. I have a couple Creative Grids rulers that have 1/8 inch marks on them. I went ahead and grabbed one of those, and then I'm going to use a friction pen for this instead of the water-soluble marker. Since it's paper tape, I think the marker is going to sort of spread out on the paper tape and it'll be harder to see. I want to find my 1/8 inch line. That is a tiny, tiny little piece there. And then make a mark. I pick the blue. I think it'll be nice and easy to see. There's the line. And again, this is the sticky side of the tape, 1/8 inch. I think before I attach this one, I am going to go ahead and trim that little line off. I think once I have it all laid out, that's going to be hard to get off. So I'm going to take my rotary cutter and trim so this little line's not visible. And since this is now a raw edge, I am going to put a little bit of fray check on it. Just carefully. You just kind of dab it. It'll dry pretty quick. And it dries clear, so if you're, like when you're looking at it, you can kind of see where the fray check is. No worries, it'll dry clear. I'm going to follow this diagram exactly. I don't want to sit there and try and fuss and make it look any different. It's a great picture. I'm going to follow it. Let's take our blue ribbon and start with that one. And you've got your nice line here. I'm going to line that up right there and go ahead and push that against the tape so that'll hold it down. Now it won't move as I lay out the rest of my ribbons. For the next part, there's lace 2 and the fabric strip. It looks like they're placed on top of each other like this. I don't see much of the fabric strip visible. It's not going to go like this. So I'm going to lay down the fabric strip, and then the lace is going to go right here. So I'll need to put a piece of tape on top of that so it doesn't move as I continue to lay out my strips and the ribbons. I'm going to tape that down. I don't want anything to move. The next one is the Old Glory ribbon. That's the one I just put the fray check on. And I'm going to slightly overlap it over that fabric. It doesn't, well, it looks like it could go next to it or not next to it. I'm going to just overlap it just a little, this tiny bit. Push it against that tape. Our next one is a red ribbon. And I just threw one on the floor. I'll have to pick that up. Put that down, and that lies right next to the Old Glory ribbon. Next is the Stars and Stripes. Put that down. Press it against the tape. Then we want one of the pink glittery ribbons, and then our skinny lace. Skinny lace. Then it says ribbon 3, which is the blue one again, and when you look at the picture, it actually looks like they have, I'm going to go ahead and lift this up. This overlaps it a bit with the Star Spangled banner. I think what I'm going to do, we'll see if this works. I'm going to put this one down here, touching the pink ribbon, and then, yeah, that'll work. We'll find out. If I get to the end and I have any weird spacing issues, I'll know that was wrong. Put that one there, and then the Star Spangled banner. I'm going to lay that right, whoops, don't put it on upside down. Could you imagine if you sewed your whole quilt together and it was upside down? Oh my goodness. I'd probably leave it. I wouldn't fuss with it at that point. Okay, it's Star Spangled banner. Now we've got lace 3, fabric, ribbon 1, and ribbon 2. I'm going to start going this direction to work on the spacing. I taped myself to my cutting mat there. Ribbon 2 is going to be here on the end of the block. Ribbon 1, fabric strip, and lace. Where did the blue ones go? Okay. Here comes a blue one. Oh, I missed a blue one too. They squeezed in a blue one between these two, kind of here. So there's a blue one right there. It's barely visible in the picture. Really, it's barely visible. You can barely see it. Okay, so now we've got the blue one there. Red, blue, fabric, and lace. And then there's another pink glittery one somewhere. Okay, red, blue, fabric, lace, and then pink glitter. Here we go. Red, blue, fabric. I'm going to put the pink glitter down and then put the lace down. The lace again overlaps. Now I do have some spacing. I can fuss with this a little bit as far as I can see the background here. This that I just did, they do have that jammed in there, but I feel like there's enough room to move some things around. So I'd say when you get to this point, if anything looks weird, like I've got a lot of this showing, and it looks like this actually might go on top of this, just move some things around. It's very easy to pull it off the tape. I'm going to fuss with it a bit and then show you what it looks like. Let me show you a little bit what I'm doing. I realized I had this ribbon and I have this ribbon bumped right up against the edge of the block. That's going to need to be sewn in. So everything here probably needs to shift a little. So I shifted this one in, and I'm sliding everything over and checking the spacing and making sure I like the way everything is spaced. That's all you have to do. You just have to take a little time fussing with it. I think I have everything where I want it. I'm going to take a ruler that's got a 1/4 inch line, because we'll be doing a 1/4 inch seam. It's a little tight here, but you can pull this out of the way when you sew. And I definitely have a 1/4 inch on this side. I want to show this just in case. It does show taping all the way across the ribbon. I'm not going to do that. That's going to be a disaster trying to get that tape off. I'm going to fold it over on itself, and you'll catch the very edges of your ribbons like that. And then it says to take it to your sewing machine and baste 1/8 inch from the edge of the background fabric across the top of the block. I'm going to show you this on my machine. This is a 1/4 inch foot without a guide, and there's a 1/4 inch line right there. But to get 1/8 of an inch, the easiest way for me to do that is to take that edge of the fabric, let me get in really close, and then slide it so it hits the center mark of this part of the presser foot, and then I'll go all the way across. That'll be about 1/8 of an inch. Here's my basting stitch. I have a Juki TL 2020 PE. It's a straight stitch only machine. I put it on a stitch length 3. That way, if these are too far this way, when I go to put this in the quilt, I can pick it and pull it out really easily. I'm going to get rid of this tape, and then we will get going on the pieced filler blocks 1 and 2. We're on pieced filler blocks 1 and 2. These are done the same way. The only difference is the background quilting file and thread. On pieced filler block number 2, there's 2 colors of thread for that plaid background quilting. Pieced filler block 1 has 1 color. I'll go ahead and step through block 1. These blocks will fit in a 5x7 hoop. If you've got the pre-cut light mesh cutaway, they're 10x12 sheets of the stabilizer. You can use that for this block. I'm going to go ahead and walk us through pieced filler block 1. Let's go ahead and load both of our files. I'm doing the background quilting. I'm going to load that file first. I need to find the KDQ 409 vertical design, the 2x6. This one, the one with all the hearts pointing the same direction. That's the one we want. Load that file. I'm going to hit my set button. Now I need to add the pieced filler block. Again, it's all on the USB. This is going to be under embroidery files, and you're going to use this same embroidery file for both of your pieced filler blocks. It's this one right here. I'm going to go ahead and set that. It centers it for me. I'm ready to go. Right now, as this is laid out, It's like every other block where it would do the batting and then your background fabric and the quilting. But this one's going to be a little bit different. We do want to put our batting down first. That's going to be that first step. That's the line. You'll place your batting on top, and then we're going to tack down our batting. After your batting's been tacked down and you trim the batting, we need to move forward to stitch the piecing template. So you'll need to jump forward and find the piecing template. See how it wants to do all the background quilting? We're going to skip over that. That's what we want next. We're going to put this right on top of our batting. Then we're going to move through, tacking down and trimming each little square of fabric. So you'll move through these in order. And then it'll get to the end and it'll place the line around your blocks. Now I'm back at the beginning. If I close my little advanced, see how it's back at the beginning? Once that happens, I need to go forward and then find the quilting. Whoops, there it is. Right there. And I'm going to do that last because we want that on top of all the squares of fabric. I'm going to go ahead and back up to the beginning and we'll step through this step by step. I'm back at the beginning. We're going to start with this. This is our batting placement line. Go ahead and put your batting right over that placement line, and then we'll stitch the batting tack down line. Once you've stitched down the batting tack down, go around and trim off the extra, and then we'll step through the files to the next part. I have my batting trimmed. I'm going to go back to the screen on my embroidery machine and show you how I advance through the steps of the design. You can see this box here. This would be if we were doing normal background quilting. This would be our fabric placement line, then there'll be a fabric tack down line, but we're doing this block a little different. What you want to look for on your machine is something like this. This has a needle and a plus minus. This is how I move forward through my steps. I'm going to go ahead and hit that. I'm going to bring the camera back up. These arrows will take me through each step rather than advancing by a number of stitches. So we don't want that. We don't want that. We don't want the quilting. We're going to do that at the end. That's what you want to see. That is your piece filler block template. It's called a piecing template. Now that I'm done advancing, I can hit OK and it'll take me out of this screen. Stitch your piecing template. If you look in the instruction book, this is fabric A, fabric B, and fabric C. We're going to start with fabric A. That's going to go down here. It says to place fabric A right side up, centered over section A. So you don't have to line up with anything. There's a stitch line here. It's not like you're lining it up. Center over that, and then we're going to stitch a trimming placement line. So we'll use this line not only to trim, we'll trim off the excess, but we're also going to use it to place the next piece. You want to trim off just this top piece of fabric. So go ahead and pull your hoop off the machine and trim off this little piece. Once you have that trimmed off, it's going to go back on your machine and you're going to take your fabric B, you're going to place it right sides together and line up along that line, and it'll stitch another line right there. You want to flip this fabric, and you can take this off the machine and go iron it if you want. I'm going to use my little clover seam roller and flatten it. You can finger press it. This little roller is handy. It gets it a little bit flatter. So we're all set there. If you want, you can tape this as well to hold it up. Go ahead and do like you did before. Cut this piece off. Once that piece is cut off, put it back on your machine. You'll take your last piece of fabric here, fabric C, and place it along that line, and then it'll stitch that tack down line. Once you've stitched that line, go ahead and flip it up. Take it off your machine and press it if you're using the iron, or finger press, or use your little seam roller. Once you do that, we're going to put it back on the machine and stitch the trimming line. That'll go all the way around the fabric on the outside. My piece isn't lying completely flat. I'm going to pull that nice and tight and add a small piece of tape at the top. You don't have to do that. I just want to do that to make sure that that stays down. Now I'm going to stitch that outside line. See how it went to the end? It says we're finished. I'm going to hit OK. I'm back at the beginning. I want to go ahead and use my advance button, and I'll advance until I see the heart quilting design up here in the little square. There we go. Once this is on your screen, go ahead and stitch your quilting design. Once you've stitched the quilting design, you're done with that. I'm going to repeat the same process for filler block number 2. Just remember this one has 2 colors of thread, and then I'll take these over to the cutting board and we'll trim these together. We want to trim these to 6.5 by 2.5. There's no orange pop ruler that size, so get a regular ruler. It says to use the trimming line as a guide, square the block, and trim to 6.5 by 2.5. You'll be trimming not quite on the stitch line, but pretty darn close. In fact, I'm going to make sure that I don't trim those stitches off. So I think what'll happen is the block will end up being 6.5 plus a little by 2.5 plus a little, because you can see this is a 2.5-inch ruler, and if I line it up, it lines up right on those stitching lines, and I do not want to cut those stitch lines. So I'm going to slide it over just a hair, and if you have a clear ruler, very helpful. I can see the stitching through the ruler, and I'm going to cut just outside the stitches on both my blocks on all sides. I'm going to bring this close and show you. I didn't want to cut right on those stitch lines. I don't want the block to come undone while we're finishing the quilt. So if I put this down and take my 2.5-inch ruler, place it on top, I probably have an extra 1/16 of an inch on either side, if that very little. But I did not want to cut into these thread lines. I want to make sure this stays together nice and neat until we're ready to put it into the quilt. Thank you for joining me for video number 8 of the Star Spangled Beauty Quilt Along. We finished our ribbons block and our piece filler blocks 1 and 2. Coming up next week, the week of June 9th, we're going to be working on the 8-point stars. There's 3 of these, and the patchwork flag block. These blocks are more involved than these blocks. These will take more time, so the video on June 9th is definitely going to be longer than this one. Now is a great time if you're just starting to catch up on everything. This week was pretty easy. You can get a copy of the schedule for the quilt along on my website. I'll put that on the screen, and it's linked in the description box below. Thank you so much for joining me. See you next time.